On behalf of the captain and the crew, we'd like to welcome you on board Flight 074, now departing to the world of our 2023 summer travel plans. Cabin crew, arm doors, and cross-check.
Thank you for listening to us today. If this is the first time listening to this podcast, welcome aboard. If you're a returning listener, we're glad you're back. Seat 1A provides tips and tricks from more than 5 million miles worth of flying to help you take off from the crowd.
In today's experience, recorded on the 5th of July, 2023, we're going to take a look at our various summer travel plans coming up.
And then we'll wrap up with a discussion about the current events in the world of aviation.
Well, this is a very different summer than last summer, that's for sure.
That is true. And for yourself, the summer before that.
Yeah, that's right. I think that you can say there's some normalcy to it all. And we heard this on various of our fellow podcasters and articles. I think, we're starting to get back to what things were like pre-pandemic. It's still not full on, but we're pretty darn close now.
Yeah, where it's like, welcome. The weather's back. Things are getting screwed up. You've got ground stops and...
Yep. The lineups are back. The staffing levels of the airports are starting to return, which is great. Which also means, people are being employed, which is also always a good thing.
And I mean, we're back to having to worry about, labor actions.
Yep. We've seen that, or some near misses on that. And then we're also now back to having to fight for reasonably priced airfares and scan that whole environment. So we'll touch on all these fun little follies.
Exactly. And we've had some journeys already prior to the recording of this experience.
We have. Who departed? I think I departed.
I departed June 1st.
You departed June 1st?
Yes.
So you were out first. All right. So where did you go?
So I did a trip that I had originally planned for 2020 with family, but so I went to the Yukon and Alaska. So I did Toronto to Calgary with Air Canada, then connected with Air North. So that's a Yukon-based airline who has a fantastic offer called a connector fare, and essentially you send them the details of your flight that gets you to somewhere that they fly to. And then they give you a very cheap ticket. So if you tell them more than 7 days in advance, it's $99, of course, with lots of restrictions. But essentially, I only had to pay $99 to get from Calgary to Whitehorse, one stop in Edmonton, up and over the mountains, and then land at Whitehorse, Yukon. And lovely scenery on the way in with all the mountains pretty much all the way up as it roughly tracks the Alaska Highway, and a single runway long enough for overseas flights to do flights with Condor, for example. Small terminal, but very functional, very effective. And the cool thing is when you get up by the highway, there's actually an old Canadian Pacific DC-3 that's in front of the airport, but also the world's largest weather vane.
That's right. I remember you were mentioning, you sent a photo of that. That's awesome. And that DC-3 looks immaculate for something that's on display, just on a stick.
Yeah, they must do work on it every single year.
Yeah.
And then did a whole pile of driving through Yukon and Alaska, so up to Dawson City, across Canada's northernmost border crossing, and then some crazy gravel roads and road construction. Yeah, Fairbanks, and then wrapped around Denali, Anchorage, went to the Alaska Aviation History Museum, which was fantastic. All sorts of old aircraft, and it being on Lake Hood, the largest seaplane base in the world. Managed to see some seaplanes take off and land, and then worked my way back around into Yukon and back up eventually through Skagway and Haines and back up into Whitehorse. Flew back down to Vancouver on Air North.
Now, was that that part of the commuter fare as well? This $99?
Yeah, so I bought a second commuter fare for the Vancouver part. So I bought two singles for Air North, which is also not, there's no IFE on their flights. Their planes are old, like 30 years old. I was
That's
on
right.
a 737 400 and 500, and one of them was at one point owned by Rwandan Airways. And but you get food, you get decent food, a nice sandwich on the one flight, and a decent deli charcuterie plate on the other, plus a warm chocolate chip cookie on both flights, and the nice approach into Vancouver over Burrard Inlet and seeing downtown and Lionsgate Bridge and everything, and coming in for a landing. A bit of insanity because I had interline bags, but a couple people in my party didn't, so we had to go out, get their bags, recheck them in with WestJet. A bit annoying with that because you go to the self-tag terminal, but then you do the bag drop and they just go through everything again anyway, as if you're just regularly checking in.
Hang on. So
it wasn't.
Let's break this one down. So which airline, who did not have interline with who?
Okay, so Air Canada has interline with Air North. So I had interlining. Yeah, and was a little nervous that it wasn't going to work, but ended up being fine. But then WestJet doesn't, so you essentially had to pull the bags and get the bags off of the belt.
So in Whitehorse, they tag the bag simply just to YVR.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then the interline bags were tagged all the way through.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have seen them, so it was all good.
Exactly, yeah. But grabbed the ones for WestJet, did the whole kiosk for bag drop, but then took it to bag drop, and they essentially did it as if it was a separate check-in. You couldn't just go drop them off at the bag drop. So it's like, well, what did I waste my time doing self-check-in for?
So your parents had boarding passes, they had the bag tags, and they couldn't just scan, match, and send you on your way?
No, you had to line back up, and the person had to go through everything again. So essentially rereading the passports, rereading
that just sounds
the check-in, rereading the tags. It's like, that does not make any sense, and the lines were going super slow.
Oh, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Did they give a reason?
Then, standard operating procedure.
Of course. Huh.
And then back through security in Vancouver, and I know you said that, you can pick different spots to go through when one's busy or less busy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it was just me being in Vancouver for the first time departing in a long time that I'm like, I didn't know where to go, or it wasn't super clear, or like lower ceilings or who knows what. But I'm just like, okay, here's the one we need to go to, and it's not super clear. And so your tips about picking it, yeah, it's definitely, if I was by myself, it would probably have been a different game, but because I was with people,
yeah, fair enough.
There was a bit of pressure being with a group that it's like, well, I can't just go and check this myself, right?
Yeah, I remember when we talked about that. Yeah, you can pick if you pay attention to the terminal maps of how things connect on the other side. There's nothing wrong with picking a different security checkpoint and getting through and connecting on that side. But like you just said, you need to have the ability to.
And I knew like it connected on the other side, but I'm like, but now you're looking at it live in person. You're like, okay, but where are these other ones that are supposedly supposed to exist?
Yeah. So you probably, having gone through WestJet, you probably went through the A side.
Yeah.
And then on the other side is the C. But yes, these are intricacies that for people that know their home airports and whatnot is where this comes into play.
Exactly. And then sat in the plane with Air Canada, and this was the second time that I had done that, the flight out to Calgary. I had sat for 3 hours because apparently the software that communicated to the cockpit was having issues. And we were delayed, and the captain unfortunately had no information for us.
Sorry, this is in Toronto when you're starting it.
In Toronto on the original part, yeah. And so we got delayed. And kudos to Air Canada, though. I filed the complaint online to say, look, I was delayed. They didn't do it right away, but literally within 3 days, they had confirmed, it was our error. And within 5 or 6, they had the full refund e-transferred back to me.
Like the full fare?
The full fare.
That's incredible.
Because it was their error and because it was more than 3 hours.
Wow. Usually that's like a fight to get to that level of
I was
solution.
somewhat surprised, but I think also because there was many people affected that day with that same software issue, and because it had ended up becoming a political issue, I think it was something they just wanted to get fixed right away and move on.
So during the whole time, you said 3 hours in Toronto. Were you attached to the gate? Had you already pushed back? What was that?
Yeah, we were attached.
And they didn't offload you guys?
No, they didn't offload us, and they didn't give us any. They didn't feed us or water us.
That's not good.
Yeah, it was like, come on, like your gate's open, you can go get
3 hours.
The pilot made.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you already got the money back, so whatever. But
yeah,
I'm trying to remember from
the pilot made mention of food, and I'm like, yeah, there's no food coming.
Yeah. In my days of flying, there was a tolerance point where we could only hold passengers on board for so long, and after which we had to do an offload.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not good. Just generally.
Yeah, and I think part of it was because there was no communication with the cockpit, like that software was broken or not working well. I think that was the issue because the pilot had no idea like where we were kind of thing. Like it could be like, well, we're going to be ready in 5 or we could be ready in 55.
True. But and I remember doing this on the ground, like we would have, I mean, as a manager, we'd, talk to the flight deck and be like, if we offload, there's obviously going to be at least a half hour of regathering everybody and getting them back in. Because once you put the crowd back out to the masses, then that's, part of the calculated risk here. So that's very interesting. Yeah.
So that was the inconvenience on the way out. But hey, I mean, I got it all back, so I could fly to Whitehorse from Toronto for $99.
True. That's true, actually. I mean, 3 hours plus another, 4. It's just you're almost across the Atlantic at that point.
Yeah, well, 2.5. Well, essentially, I did the measuring. It's like from Toronto to Whitehorse, Great Circle would have been the same as me flying Toronto to Bogota.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, just the way everything lands.
Yeah. So I mean, it definitely lets you learn how big Canada is, how far west the Yukon is, how far the differences, the remoteness of that part of North America. I mean, Alaska felt less so because I was in the part that had road contact in larger cities. Yukon definitely felt remote in spots, going a couple hundred kilometers without any cell phone signal or anything, for example.
Yeah.
But then on the way out of Vancouver, we got delayed an hour because we had connecting passengers from Hong Kong. And the apparent message, and I have no idea how this actually works, was that they were not, quote, scanned properly in Hong Kong or screened properly. So they had to go through Canadian security again or something.
Now that's an interesting one. Because I've had this where I've gotten on flights fully screened, and then you get to a transit point and you basically have to redo and re-through.
Yeah.
But that's just normal. That's just the way the terminal is built. So it's interesting how you get the messaging that comes through. It's kind of like the telephone game is basically were they actually not screened properly? Well, that doesn't necessarily make sense because how could they have made it onto
taken off from Hong Kong
on Cathay Pacific? Doesn't make sense.
Or Air Canada, one of their premier.
Yeah. You know what it sounds like to me is that the passengers made an error and left airside, and they probably didn't realize that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And were out ground side and had to just come back through, and hence the wait.
Yeah. I mean, took the wrong turn at customs or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's most likely what I think, just based on the flight you're saying and the connection.
They'll pin it on the other airport as opposed to like people giving the extra glare to the passengers because it's like, oh, it's your fault. Huh?
Yeah. And, English as a second language, age, all these things come into play. Is it fair on the passenger? Not necessarily. Do they consciously make a decision to go out and get a burger? Who knows? We'll never know.
A Japa dog in Vancouver?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, all in all, relatively easy flying and a bit of adventures in the airport, but for the most part, nothing overly stressful, and would definitely I would definitely fly Air North again.
Yeah, Air North's a great sort of boutique airline that operates here in the northwest of Canada. It's definitely a proving ground for young, recently graduated pilots that are earning their hours. It's some great flying,
Yeah,
classic older aircraft. And it's a great company. And Air North actually also provides massive ground ramp services and passenger customer service in airports as well.
yeah,
Sometimes people don't realize that they have a ground handling side because, you think $99 fares here and there for these lengthy flights. How are these guys making money? There's always a economical
yeah.
side in the back that, people don't realize.
And the thing about them was that they are owned by, I believe it's the Gwich'in, if I pronounce that incorrectly, pardon me, but it's like the tribe in very far north of
Mm-hmm.
Yukon in Old Crow. And the only way into Old Crow is by plane. But the situation was, back in the day, there wasn't any competition for fares in Yukon, and people from Yukon had to pay through the nose to fly anywhere.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, and that still happens in the north of Canada where it's just monopolized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
But then you had some Canadian flights as well
Yeah,
in
I had a
June.
simple domestic trip for a work conference that I had to go to, and it had some interesting points. So my first run was Vancouver to Calgary to London, Ontario, not London, UK, unfortunately, London, Ontario. So London, Ontario is a city of, I don't know, I think it's like 50,000. A
No, it's much bigger than that.
bit bigger than that. Okay. Southwest of Toronto. It services a university crowd. So that's where I was heading. When I was purchasing the fare way back a few months ago through work, there's only two airlines that fly there, and that is in Canada, it's Air Canada and WestJet. My preference to go Air Canada through Toronto, but it wouldn't get me in time for the first session I needed to make. And if there was any delay on top of that, that would have really blown the whole attendance of agenda out of the water. So the other option was to catch a flight on WestJet. But the caveat to that is it was a 6 a.m. departure time out of Vancouver.
Ooh,
Yeah, which I was not thrilled about, but it is what it is and it's fine. So how did it start? I pre-booked an Uber, which, as I found later in the billing cycle, had a little catch point as well. So I pre-booked an Uber for a 4 a.m. departure from my house. And of course, the guy's not even on time, but eventually shows up. And, can I just say, I do not like riding in Teslas. This is like
fair
the
enough.
third time I've had an Uber experience in a Tesla. This is the Model Y, and the ride quality is just abysmal. It's like riding in a plastic can, and suspension and everything about it. Yeah, anyway, that's just my little beef. But
Side ramped.
yeah, side route. And so the catch is that when I looked at, when I obviously came back, was doing my expense, I'm like, why did it cost me $54 to go from where I live to Vancouver, which should be about a $30-ish run? And it doesn't show up on the app. When you reserve an Uber, there's a $15 reservation fee.
Oh,
Did not know
good
that.
to know.
Yeah, it only comes out in the billing. You go on the app and you say, I want to have a pickup, and you pick whatever style of Uber you want, XL or X or Black. And it just says, okay, great. A vehicle will be there. And you think, fantastic. And you think that it's going to be the
Just
fare
like
that
normal.
you're kind of expecting. And well, I guess I saw it after I'd finished the ride. I didn't have time to think about why and go and open the invoice and all this kind of stuff. So that was a little bit annoying. But anyway, airports in the mornings are quite hectic because all the flights, they're called Head Start flights. There's a term for it. And everyone's trying to start the day right. Every airline, every aircraft, all crew, they want to get the plane out early, hopefully, because the plane's
Yeah.
got multiple legs to go through during the day.
Yeah, you don't want to be like 45 minutes late for the 9:30 flight or something, right?
Yeah.
9:30 p.m. flight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the standard, I checked it online, had the bag all done, went to the kiosk, printed the tag, went to the bag drop line, probably the same line that used to it. My experience going through it was seamless, just like boarding pass scan, bag tag scan, put on the belt. But it was just very interesting listening to what the customer service agent at the junction of the bag drop to the left or check-in assistance to the right line has to go through just in the 10 minutes that I was there. Passengers not understanding at all the difference between the two lines, what they have to do at the kiosk, and starting to get irate. I'm like, wow, people still just don't, they're not programmed for this. They don't understand. They need to listen to our podcast more, I think, clearly.
They had a hard drive wipe for 3 years.
Yeah, pretty much. So anyway, I just walked away from that. No, I have Nexus. So I fast tracked, breezed right through, and it was fine. And security was just hopping at that point. So the next thing, this is now what, 4:45 a.m. And I had arranged to go meet a coworker who happened to subsequently be on a Air Canada flight, also leaving at 6, going to a conference, also in Eastern Canada. So I whipped over to where she was. Everyone wants to get their coffee. So the Starbucks line is just bonkers.
All the way back to security.
Oh, almost. I mean, you see this at every airport. And is there anything the Starbucks or whatever the coffee provider can do to make this better? I don't know. But everyone's just standing there like zombies. Some of the people aren't even there to buy a coffee product. They're just buying a stupid bottle of water. I'm like, you see the empty store 3 meters to the right.
Yeah, the Relay store, the INS, or whatever, right?
It's probably the same price because it's regulated. Like, why are you here holding up me trying to get an actual product being made by this particular shop?
Yeah.
But the one thing that I had forgotten is, a Starbucks or something, they will serve you a coffee that is too hot to drink. And so now and I, at that point, I'm like, oh, I probably need to head back to my gate because they're going to call boarding soon. I just want to get in, collapse kind of thing. I'm now running through the terminal with a ripping hot grande, whatever, cursing myself. I'm like, why did I bother? Why do I no, I should just get this in Calgary. Why do I need to be awake for my 6 a.m. 1 hour flight? Doesn't make sense. But anyway, it was too late. I went to meet my coworker. Let's get the coffee. Okay, fine. She's a junior traveler. I just don't relate. But anyway, that's me. So I zipped over and got on a WestJet 737-800, very tired aircraft that I knew very well from when I used to work on these aircraft, these exact plane. And this particular aircraft was the one that was painted in the Disney Frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it has like Elsa on the tail and all this stuff. And in the days
so when you knew the registration and you knew the plane.
I knew that plane. I've flown it many, many times. But the one thing that was different is when I used to work them, it was a newer Disney plane, which meant the interior was also painted. And it was painted this Frozen theme. And we hated working on it because it was visual overload. Like all the bins were decorated in forest and green and blue and this. The seats had like stars on them, the side walls. It was atrocious. For a cabin crew, when you're a passenger sitting with one perspective, it's fine. But when you're a crew,
and it's your only time on this plane, and
exactly. Anyway, all the interior had been stripped off. It was just the exterior. I'm like, that's fine. So anyway, we sat, and my blood pressure is rising because I'm watching.
Dumb question. Sorry to go sideways with this. When they do that with because I don't think I've ever flown on like a cartoon themed livery. Mm-hmm. Is it common to do the inside, or was this just?
Yeah, there's usually tweaks inside that match. Like I know I think ANA,
like the Pikachu or the
exactly, and like the headrest will be like a theme color, or there'd be like embroidery and logoing kind of going.
Okay,
yeah, just to make it fun. Yeah, and yeah, I mean we took off on time, no issues, pushback, taxi, all good. I had a window seat. The gentleman next to me opted to take all his armrest space. So I was like, well, whatever.
You lean into the window.
Yeah, exactly. Quick flight over to Calgary. And what was very apparent is it's forest fire season in Canada. and landing into the smoke. And I was like, oh, yes, smoke operations. Now, Calgary is an airport that I thought I knew very well. I worked in that airport for years when I was with British Airways. And then I continued to work through that airport as crew because WestJet's home base is Calgary. So I was in and out of there multiple times a week. But there's whole new terminal wings that have been added on. But that didn't click in my brain because I thought I'm a domestic arrival connecting to domestic flight. We're just going to go to the domestic section, which I know like the back of my hand. No, we ended up pulling in at a US pre-clear swing gate. I think we've talked about swing gates before.
Yes.
But we can
back in our gate experiences.
Yeah. So just a swing gate, it's a gate that can have multifunction purpose. And by that, we mean it can have a domestic arrival and an international departure or vice versa. And that just means where do you channel the passengers to get in and out of that aircraft with the use of doors and pathways and hallways. So it expands the airport's ability to offer gates as flights are needed. So clearly the plane I was flying on was about to turn to go somewhere down to the US. But you could see the look of not panic, but you could see the tension level rise because we're pulling in next to, I think, American Airlines and United Airlines was in the distance. And some people were like, why are we here with the American carriers? Like they didn't understand the swing gate experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it was fine. So I entered and I knew, okay, swing gate. And I went into a building that never existed before. In fact, I think it sits on what used to be the employee parking lot that I used to park at so many years ago. And it's incredible. It's a beautiful airport now. Lots of clear paths and food options. And it was great. I was like, wow, this is great. But one thing about this forest fire thing is no matter how thick the glass is, no matter how big the building is with the HVAC systems, you can still smell it. It's still in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very apparent. When I stepped off that plane into the turn, I'm like, wow, I can just feel it in here. Unfortunately. I only had like an hour connection time. So I quickly grabbed food and sustenance to take. And I was like, it's very quiet here. I'm going to get it here because I know the other end's going to be hopping. And I actually had to ride this. They have this fun
glorified golf cart
that they make it feel like you're riding like a bus, but it's like this tiny little, not a tram. Yeah, that's the only way to say it. It's a glorified golf cart. It's dressed up with like a lot of paneling.
Yeah.
And it moves you to a different section of the terminal.
And when I was taking that flying out of Calgary, we drove to the one end and it's like all of a sudden this door was open and I'm like, oh, there's the garage where all of these things.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Old door was up and it's like, yeah, then it went down. I'm like, oh, well, that's where they put them all.
Yeah. Calgary's known for that program. I mean, it's called the White Hatters, the volunteers that, operate that. So great service, no issues, plenty of frequency, get to the other end. And, the design of this airport, like a lot of other airports, they call it kind of like a hammerhead where all these flights are just rammed next to each other at gates and kind of like the Los Angeles thing where you can barely hear the announcements and you're just kind of looking at your assigned gate thing. Well, I see people moving. I guess they're boarding. I can't hear what zone, whatever. But I was in like zone 2 right away, I think. So I just went in. It was fine. Yeah, and then that flight was no issues. I had a great seat. Of course, I knew one of the cabin crew members on board. So, she took care of me and landed in London, Ontario.
So, correction to your point there about population, just checked, it's like 420,000.
That's good to know because it felt like there was only 50,000 people living in this place. Wow, this London, Ontario is definitely one of the places.
Because all the students were gone for the summer.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think I'll be returning there anytime soon, potentially in my lifetime. But whatever, these airports do their best to kind of
sort of like a stereotypical secondary Canadian airport.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It was just like three gates kind of thing. And all fine. You kind of arrive and there's like, you're just in the mass pen with everybody because it's domestic. It took a while for the bags because I had a checked bag and there's only 2 belts and everything's beeping and all this kind of stuff. And you could see the the airport workers around with radios, but nobody's really communicating. And basically, they had to switch to a different belt, but there was no announcement to it. I knew because I could see everything going on. I'm like, okay, they're just switching in the back end. Bags are going to come out. So I just quietly wandered over to the actual one and
New belt.
got a good spot. And the last thing about this airport is now the curbside experience, which we've talked about many times. I booked an Uber, but it was me and a coworker. The cell phone provider on her phone and my personal phone had no service at the airport. It was like barely
Okay.
clinging on. Like you could almost get a bar, but not enough to even like have your Uber app working. My work phone was on a completely different provider and it had full service. So we had to use my work phone. So that was an interesting
Weird.
thing. If I was there just on my personal phone, there was no way I was going to get an Uber that day. So that was a bit annoying.
Crazy.
Came out to the curb and I don't know, there was a bunch of black SUVs lined up. I'm like, oh, is this the limo service line? Where is the rideshare pickup? And they haven't identified one. So, you kind of wander down a little bit and find a blank piece of curb and drop your pin, and that's where you go. Yeah, but I mean, they don't necessarily have the volume to have to justify doing all these upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the
And
end.
a pile of people anyway. They just drive the 2 hours to Pearson anyway. So
Well, exactly. And so that's how my return. So I was there in London, Ontario, did my conference. I had meetings in Toronto. So I opted to rent a car in London and drive out. So I had to take an Uber from the hotel downtown back to the airport and then take the vehicle. And yeah, the drive to Toronto, uneventful, pretty straightforward, all good. Ran my day of meetings. And now flying home, I was on Air Canada 8. Let me think of this. The flight departure time was 8:30 originally scheduled. Fine. So I had that all planned out for my day. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I'm checking a bag. The bag drop cutoff time for domestic is 45 minutes. So I'm like, okay, well, at least an hour, if not more. And I got to return the car. So I think I was planning to drop the car at 7 p.m.
okay.
That was my plan. So I can drop the car because it's quite a walk to get in from the car rental area to the Air Canada bag drop. But I would have been fine, probably would have been like 7:10. Cutoff time would have been 7:45, plenty. Well, in all things of the laws of Murphy, my run into Pearson was starting to get delayed with traffic and a few errands I needed to do. So I was really like getting it pretty darn close. I looked on the app, the flight was delayed by 15 minutes. So now this brings up an interesting quandary. This baggage cutoff time, does it correlate to the originally scheduled time or the actual?
That was like me last summer
Mm-hmm.
when I had the massive delays going to Copenhagen.
Exactly. So, and I've been cut off before, actually at the same airport by the same airline on a trip transatlantic. So I was like, no, this is not happening again. So I literally like broke a bunch of speed laws, flew this car.
Everybody does on the 401. You don't have to worry.
Yeah, exactly. Dixie Road, all these kind of places, just blasting her through. Fortunately, it wasn't rush hour anymore, so I was able to get this car into the Enterprise car rental lane. And in the mad flurry of me like dropping the car, 30-second small talk with the agent, check the car out, get my bag. I didn't realize at the time, but I left my very nice raincoat in the back seat. More on that later. So I go, I'm not usually the type of guy that needs to run through an airport. I had to run because I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, oh man, this is getting close. I think I was calculating on the original time, like at least have a 15-minute buffer, but I don't want to risk it. So I think at 8:27, I walked into the terminal. And where it outputs you, I had to go all the way to the other end to the check-in kiosk. So I ran up to the kiosk and I can see the lines. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to print my tag, go to bag drop. The Air Canada kiosks don't print bag tags. I went to 4 kiosks and it just kept spitting out a boarding pass. I'm like, are you kidding me? So now I'm chewing into my 15-minute mysterious contingency time. And I'm like, this,
That's weird because I've never had an issue with tags.
yeah, maybe this one bank, or maybe there was something going on. So I flagged down an agent, and I could tell she was about to go on her break. And I'm like, I just have a quick question. I'm trying to print the bag tag, and it's not. Where do I go? She said, yeah, the machines don't print the tags here. I'm like,
Oh crap.
like, I'm getting close to cutoff time. It's like, it's okay. Go to the priority line, and tell them I sent you. Like, okay, fine, great. So I go over to the super elite status line, and there's a gatekeeper there. And again, we talk about this a lot in all our recordings. You just have to have the right angle of attack and approach. If you go in yelling and screaming, "Oh my goodness, my bag," I'm like, they're just going to say no. But if you go in with direct, proper information that they can give you a solution for in a heartbeat, you usually move forward. And I just walked up to the agent. I showed her the 4 boarding passes. I'm trying to just drop the bag. I'm getting pretty darn close to cut off. Your colleague across the hall there sent me here. Am I okay to go through? She's like, yep, no problem. And she's like, tell the lady at the desk that I cleared you through. I'm like, even better. Got through, tagged it, no issues. So clearly that shows that 15, the cutoff time correlates to whatever the departure time is meant to be with delay, which is good.
Good to know.
Yeah. But I was getting a bit close for time. So the same coworker that I had the coffee with in Vancouver was on the same flight as me. So again, I had to get through, and no issues. I went through the Nexus line. But what was interesting, and again, there's inconsistencies in security and seems to be within the country, which doesn't make sense. In Vancouver, when I went through, I was carrying 2 laptops with me. I had to pull everything out and all this.
That's a new thing in Toronto. I know where you're going with this.
No laptops. Nothing.
No laptops, no water. Like, you don't have to take anything out.
No, it was fantastic. I'm like, okay, great. So I just did my usual phone and belt and all that kind of stuff. And that was the end of it. It was very nice. It was very good. And ritzed over to the gate. And I don't know, when airports plan their gates sometimes in the designing, I'd love to know what's on the table, because we were at a gate that is sort of tucked behind a food service outlet, and there's nowhere to line up. You can't hear anything. It was abysmal. So yeah, it was interesting. My friend is lining up in, I think she would have been in zone 4 or 5. She was in a zone ahead of me. But yeah, I'm trying to look at the gate, reading the cues, and I could see all the pre-boards, all the business classes through, no issues. And I know at some point, eventually, having done it myself, you then open that second line for general. And I saw that they opened it. I could see where they were going with this, and it's delayed. Generally, once you get into delayed and they just want to get the flight out, your zones start to kind of not matter as much.
Word.
So I just said see ya to my friend and just blasted ahead and got on my flight. It's great. So now I go in and I sit down, and then I realize, oh no, my jacket. Crap. And I remember I tossed it in the backseat of the car, and I did not check it because of the mad rush and panic. Like, oh. Well, there was a further delay for us. It wasn't much. It was maybe an extra 10 minutes. It was just standard kind of waiting for passenger, waiting for bag kind of thing. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. No, I retract. The captain comes on and says, we're waiting for our first officer to fly the plane to join me. I'm like, oh no, here we go. He's inbound on another flight that's only just landed. I was like, oh great, this is starting to snowball. Here we go, because the plane's still taxiing, and everyone's got to disembark. He's got to get out of the aircraft himself, go through the terminal, probably go to the washroom, do all his biological things, and make his way in. But the captain is very good, and he said, I'll keep giving you updates on his status, and very apologetic, all this kind of good stuff. So there was time. in that time, I thought, okay, I have ground time. I'm going to call the car rental agency and start getting on this jacket of mine because I don't want them to just throw it away because that can happen. What a nightmare that ended up becoming. I call and there's no local branch numbers listed. It ends up going to an 800 system. And it says, if you have lost and found, click dial here. And I've done this once before. Like, that's going to take me to like a central call center. And then they're going to bounce me to local branch. So like, no. And it says, if you need information about the local branch, click one or whatever. So I did that. And I think I must have tried 7 or 8 times. Impossible to get through. It just would hang up on me. It would put me on hold for 2 runs, like 2 bits of music with a recording in the middle saying your call is important to us. Well, clearly it's not. And then it says, no one can take your call this time. Try again later. And it would end it.
Click.
Yeah. Very, very frustrating. So then what it is, okay, there's got to be some other system about this. I messaged someone else to try for me, a different coworker that had come on a meeting with me, simply because he knew the car and he was aware of everything going on. Oh, sorry. I also tried a partner car rental agency because I was renting with Enterprise. Well, they're National, Alamo, they're all the same. So I tried all the systems and everything failed.
Crashed out.
So I go online and says, if you've lost an item, use our online reporting system. I'm like, oh, okay. Why did I bother stressing out about the phone? I'll just do everything here. Fantastic. Great. I just wanted to at least get the record down.
Get the ticket going. Yep.
Yeah. So they don't huck it. And you go in and it says, please select your return airport here. Toronto Pearson wasn't listed. There were only Ottawa and Richmond, Vancouver. Like, okay. Weird. It says, if your airport's not listed, click here. So you click on that and it takes me to the general customer service submission inquiry page. Like,
oh, geez.
I'm not liking this. But there was a subject line, lost and found. I'm like, okay. So I put the whole thing in saying, okay, date, time, rent, brought car. Here's the rental agreement, license plate, blah, 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 blah. And fantastic. And that was it. I hit send. The first officer had arrived in the meantime of me doing all these calls and flew home on also an Air Canada A321, which is, it's a nice plane, but it's getting a bit tired.
It's getting older. Yeah.
Yeah. You see it when you go to the lab and stuff, like just the furnishings, the this and the that. I'm like, oh, I remember those planes from so long ago. Like they've been around for a while. I get into Vancouver, uneventful, but open my email and there's a response from a customer service person about my jacket. And it essentially says, please use the online submission form to deal with this. And there's this big disclaimer. We will not be following up on this at any point further from this team. I was irate at this point. So long story short, I tried calling for a couple more days. I said, okay, I'm going to have to write quite a heftier inquiry. And I wrote all the details saying, I tried to do it. The airport's not listed. It tells me to do this. I've already had one of your agents say no. Can someone please just file and help me find my bag or my jacket? And finally, a week later, someone from the local branch and had CC'd 2 others from the local branch said, we'll look for your jacket, give a quick description. They found it, and lo and behold, they actually had it. And who ended up picking it up?
Me.
Yes. Thank you. It was great.
A journey into the that area around airports where you're just like, this is some sort of weird.
Yeah.
Like people don't live here, people work here, but it just like great for plane spotting. But I mean,
that's about it.
Yeah, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go now because
yeah, exactly. I remember I sent you the location and it was like, good luck. If you want me to cover the Uber for safety, that's fine. Yeah. So that was a bit of a learning point, and hopefully for those of you listening, it's never straightforward as we've seen. Just simply losing
check your car before you get out.
What's that?
Check your car before you go.
Well, yeah, check. Yeah, exactly. So.
If you're liking this episode experience, You may also enjoy Experience 22. Why is my plane parked there? The world of gate assignments. It's available wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, so that was the end of that trip. But now we have quite a bit more coming up this summer. So you're off on quite a good one.
I'm on an adventure in just under 2 weeks. So I fly from Toronto to Frankfurt. And I was fortunate enough to book these way back in late January, early February, when prices were still reasonable. There were some crazy flight things I was looking at when I booked that economy was more expensive than premium economy on some flights.
Wow. And which airline is this?
So this is Air Canada.
Yeah.
The early, like 5 o'clock departure to Frankfurt, like 10 to 5 or whatever, and getting into Frankfurt around 6:30 in the morning. So intending to have a full day. I've paid for premium economy with the intention of, well, I have a budget available to me to upgrade. So I put a bid in as well. We'll see what happens with that. And because I booked also really early, there was a couple train tickets that I had. They were each about 10 euros at the time. I'm like, okay, well, if I get in early enough, I'll take this one. If I have to wait, then I'll take this one, but I have them both and go from there. Visiting some people that I lived with for a while in Germany a long time ago. And,
there's something you said,
some birthdays.
6:30 a.m. arrival in Frankfurt. That just gives me such great nostalgia because there's something unique about landing. I mean, primarily in Europe, because we're about to talk about coffee at that early morning when all the shops are starting to like brew up and activate, and that smell of coffee and pastries as you're walking through. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Or heck, I mean, you're in Frankfurt. It's like, all right, it's 6:45. I'll have a beer, please.
Well, that too. Yes. Yeah.
And then up by train and back. The section of the Intercity Express between Kassel and Fulda is under repair this summer, so trips are about an hour longer than they normally would be to go on that stretch. So that impacted some of my decisions. Then the following day, I'm going back down to Frankfurt, taking a inter-European flight to Vienna, celebrating a couple more birthdays. And so Austrian from Frankfurt to Vienna, pretty straightforward. Did it the one way last year back to Frankfurt. And then Vienna's pretty straightforward, easy into town, trains and of multiple types. And then the following day after that, fly out of Vienna to Dusseldorf to visit an old friend that we both know who now lives in Dusseldorf, and spending a afternoon, evening there. And then the following day, I could have flown out of Dusseldorf on a 3:30, but didn't feel like flying with a whole pile of other people. So instead, I'm trying a new airport, going to Cologne, and on a 321 of all aircraft types, Cologne to Istanbul.
Is that on Turkish?
And on Turkish.
Yeah.
And then connecting in Istanbul and flying to Bodrum on the Mediterranean Adriatic coast.
Yep. Oh, Bodrum's great. Fantastic.
And having not been to, I've already done all the e-visas and everything, so I don't have to worry about craziness of visas like I did last year. And I haven't been to Istanbul airport ever, either old or new, and learning that it is the world's largest airport for square meters under one roof.
Yep. Yeah, you'll experience the magic when you set foot in that thing and just look around. It's great. It's fantastic.
And as I commented to my parents, I'm like, I've got some new shoes. They'll definitely get some usage going from.
Now you had
across the terminal.
You had a snafu with Turkish trying to book.
Yeah, the crazy thing with Turkish was, so this is actually on the way back. So I fly down to Bodrum, fly back to Istanbul on a 3:30 for 1 hour, 1 hour flight. So that should be fun. But then on the way back, due to an American Express offer and type of car that I have, I had a bunch of points, Aeroplan points that were provided. So I got a very decent deal, business class from Istanbul to Toronto via Vienna. And so the Air Canada portion, I was able to figure out, booked seat 1A, and but I couldn't do the Turkish part from Istanbul to Vienna. And I tried the Air Canada site. They're like, because it's not booked with us, we can't do it. Tried the Turkish website. They're like, well, we can't do anything with this booking reference. And I'm just like, whatever. And then I call Turkish and they're like, well, no, you need to call Air Canada to do it. I'm like, but they already said they can't. And finally was going around and around and around, and went to a Flyer Talk and just was putting in a query to say, okay, well, what do I do for Turkish code shares on points flights? And they're like, you need to actually book the seats through the app. I was like, that's the craziest thing I ever heard.
That is most
I downloaded the app and it worked.
And I think something similar happened to me.
Because you had a Turkish points
I use an Aeroplan's point redemption.
Turkish, right? Yeah,
multiple airlines, and Turkish is one of them. And yes, I remember trying to get the seats done was a chore. I think in the end, calling into Turkish is the only way I did it at that time. But clearly that didn't even work for you now.
Yeah, so it was just like it was just a random find. And so if anybody is doing Turkish flights on points, download the app. Who knows what you'll be able to get, and screenshotted the seat reservation and be like, okay, like here it is. Like if you don't believe me. So yeah, it's an early flight out of Istanbul at whatever it is, 10 to 8 in the morning. So I know I'm going to be downtown Istanbul, even at 5. I'll probably have to leave downtown at like 4:30 or something. And
that's going to be rush hour going.
But it's on a Sunday, fortunately. I mean, but so it should be.
Sorry, I meant airplane rush hour.
Yeah, true. Yes, at the airport, but more for connectors rather. Well, we'll see how it goes.
It's funny you mentioned Bodrum. I had a fun memory of that one because the time when I flew there, again, it was something it was a domestic flight, probably from Istanbul to Bodrum, and it was an night arrival. And when we landed, it was a tarmac offload to bus, and across the way was, I don't think it was Aeroflot, but it was a Russian airliner, and it was. No, I'm not totally familiar.
Like an Ilyushin or something,
yeah, it's the large passenger plane where you offload through the cargo door zone.
Okay.
So there's a staircase inside the airplane that you go down to cargo level, and then there's a door that opens there, and then you come out onto stairs.
Cool.
It was the first time I'd ever seen this in action. It was just like the most bizarre. It was almost like seeing Noah's Ark unload. Like from a distance, you just see like this door and like these people like ants coming out from the belly of this very large 4-engine wide body jet. Oh, the name of it escapes me right now, but we all know it. But yeah, that's what I thought about Bodrum. I'm like, okay, that's my airport memory.
Well, and the fun thing, I mean, Toronto's great for connections, but I love landing in like Frankfurt and Istanbul. I'm sure will be the same, just to see like connections from literally everywhere.
Yeah, and with the flipboard.
Exactly. And I sent you it was from last year, but it was like the 50th anniversary of Frankfurt Terminal 1 opening, and the 70s videos, and the same old flipboard was there. But yeah, definitely looking forward to it, and I'm looking also forward to having a lie flat on that flight back, having to probably fly on not so much sleep. That it'll be.
Did you actually book seat 1A?
I booked a seat 1A on the Air Canada flight from Vienna to Toronto.
Very nice. Very nice.
So
it's I had booked that seat when I did the Doha Toronto run a year and a half ago. I actually ended up moving to row 3 or 7, 3A maybe. Because I mean, it's still seat 1A. Like, this is a very first world problem here, but it's right up there, close to the galley and stuff.
I think for me, it was like I would have picked a different. I mean, I wanted to do it once because of our podcast, but of course, because it's a day flight, I'm fine with it. If it had been a night flight, I probably would have picked something else.
Yes, good point.
And my flight from Istanbul to Vienna, whatever it is, like 2 hours. It's 3A.
Very nice. Good. That'll be good to debrief on that one.
And we'll see what all sorts of insanity goes on. And it's nice to have 3 new airports in my collection from when I return. So
yeah, And while you're away, I'll be making my way out to you, family
Hmm.
vacation. Um, Nothing too crazy, but I mean, Canada's a big country, and for those of us living out here on the West Coast, going to the East Coast is a trip in itself. And we thought it was time to visit a lot of friends and family that we have in the Toronto area. So finding the flights for this was a very interesting chore again. And then, touching on strategies on how to search flights, it just really like stresses you out and racks your brain. You kind of hit Google Flights and you start looking. And here in Canada now, the onset of ULCCs has come back. We
Hmm.
have Lynx Air and Flair, and then that's they're in their own tier. And then you have the mainliners. And then you have one other interesting one in the middle, which we'll get to.
And the interesting thing is there was a very Canadian professor who goes to is in a lot of things talking
Mm-hmm.
about airline pricing and other things. Professor Grodek, I think is how you say his name, or Grondek, from McGill. And I heard a podcast from with him. He says, "Well, I start with the ULCCs to sort of figure out where the floor price is for Canadian domestic flights."
So that's your
Yeah.
baseline. Yeah,
So you're
exactly.
not going to get
Yeah.
anything cheaper
Well,
than this because I mean, if it's too cheap even for the ULCCs, nobody's going to go cheaper than that.
yeah. So based on your dates, you need to be comfortable with at least
Yeah,
that and then higher. Yeah. And that's what I ended up doing, because we were pretty set on our dates. And the minute you open Google Flights or most of the other ones, the cheap fares are like, oh, great, I can do this. When you start clicking through, then you really got to think about, your day and your life and your
and your
logistics.
ancillary costs.
Yeah. So, for any sort of reasonable daytime flight, and we booked this a month ago, so we're still like 2 months out. All the daytime flight, the prices were just
Yeah,
exorbitant. So we've put ourselves on a red eye on a classic Air Canada red eye out of Vancouver, and we do have a 2-year-old toddler,
have
so
fun.
praying that he'll sleep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was fairly straightforward. And again, here comes the world of the credit card and the baggage fee. We have the TD Aeroplan Visa, which guarantees the free bag if you book it on. So that now then changes the pricing when you start looking at the competition
Yeah,
airlines, because that has a significant value to it. And then for the return, same thing. The cheap flights are leaving at 6 a.m.,
yeah.
6:45.
Anything
We're
midday.
traveling as a family. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we're traveling as a family. We're staying with, my friend and her family in the eastern part of Toronto. To make a 6 a.m. flight, we're raising the
3:30.
alarm at probably
Yeah,
2:30, 3. Like, that's just disrespectful. And that's no, we're not doing that. So I'm like, okay, well, what else is there? Well, in Canada, we have a new player on the market for cross country, which is Porter Airlines, which you're very familiar with because they've been operating out of the
yeah,
old
and
Bishop
they've been
Airport.
flying propeller planes, Q400s, for quite a while. And this year they got into the Embraer flights
Embraer Jets.
out of Pearson.
Yeah, so we're going to give them a whirl. It's a 10:30 a.m. departure, beautiful times. Yes, have to pay for bag. But, I came to a point where I was like, what is the value of money for this timing issue? The wake up and the inconvenience versus just paying a bit more and everything kind of makes your day more normal.
Yeah,
So I ended up spending that. And we'll see. It's a 2-2 config. So we're a family of 3. So we'll have to kind of split across, but that's okay. I've heard good things
and I think
with the
they
airlines.
just the way they set up their seats, you get a little bit of extra, almost sort of couchish or sofa style space, and I can't remember if like food and beverage is a little bit cheaper or included or something.
You get a standard array of like call it heavy snacks. Like it's more than just
Yeah,
pretzels, but everybody on the plane gets like, and then I think it's free beer and wine as
yeah,
well. There's a few other little perks and free Wi-Fi. So they throw in a few other bits and bobs, which is nice because they don't have an in-flight entertainment system, but you know your iPad will suddenly connect, and it's fully streamable Wi-Fi,
nice.
which is fantastic. Oh, interesting point, and I'm sure you've used it already. For those of us that are Aeroplan members with Air Canada, we get free texting service on board. So I was able to activate that on my flight, and I was able to use iMessage, WhatsApp, the standard plethora
I mean, I
of.
haven't used it myself, but there was a friend of mine flying to Frankfurt earlier this year, and like we're getting all these WhatsApp messages from him in the middle of his flight.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great. I wasn't able to, and I tested it. I'm like, let me see if I can stream something random or even music, but no, and that's fine. It was kind of nice to be able to chat, check
Yeah.
in. So yeah. Well, there you go.
And
That's
and then
what we're
in
going to be up
August, I've
to.
got just a very, very quick turnaround on a weekend to Calgary. So it's like fly in, see some family for a family event, and then fly back the Sunday. So, but yes,
Yeah.
it yeah. So that would be less eventful than your events and my earlier flights in the year. So hopefully, I mean,
Yeah.
no 3 hour delays on the.
Yeah. Hopefully. Let's see. All right.
Okay.
What do we
So what
have
do we got in the
going on in
news?
the news? Yeah. I got one here from Simple Flying.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. Japan Airlines will hire clothes to tourists to let them travel light.
Okay.
So the long and short of it is that as a passenger, you can rent clothes at your Japanese destination so that you don't have to pack them and have it as weight, as
Mm-hmm.
baggage, etc. You can just hire clothes on the other end. So they've partnered up with one of the largest corporations, Sumitomo. It's a clothing rental service. It's their whole shtick is to reduce airline fuel consumption and carbon emissions because we're theoretically making it lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's different rates. The clothes will be sent directly to the passenger's accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go get it. It'll just be at your airport. I mean, there's rentals here for all sorts of stuff. And you can rent up to 8 outfits for as long as 2 weeks. You can also include a laundry service if you want for that. So they're trialing it just on Japan Airlines flights through until August 2024. And then they're going to hopefully see if One World members want to start participating. So very, very interesting concept. I think, when we're talking about seasonal travel, the big bulky winter coat, or maybe on the business side, if you just simply need
Suit jacket.
a navy blazer for a man, or like the pretty black
Yeah.
dress for a female kind of thing. These
A
things,
cocktail dress or something, right?
yeah, something just generic. Interesting. I mean, I haven't clicked on it much, but I wanted to kind of go to the site. Sizing, this is the risk you take, but my love of Japan
Yeah.
and all things Japanese, and the fact that you're going to deliver it to your hotel, I can just see the precision and
Yeah.
beauty and all of this working out. So I hope
And a
this
North
is
American
something that happens.
XL. How big do I need to order on the Japanese site?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And then,
Yeah. So there's
and
that.
as a
What do you have?
Canadian, yeah, I mean, it's always a pain in the butt to travel in the winter.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's just stuff that you have to
Yeah.
take.
But I know that there's other airports that do like coat checks at their airports when I think it was like a few Canadian airports where you're flying to say somewhere like a hotspot. It's like, well, I don't need to take my jacket with me now that I'm in the airport. I'm flying to Mexico, so I'll just leave this here for a week and then I'll pick it up on my way back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I think I remember that out of Edmonton.
Yes.
Used to have that
I'm
service.
guessing
Yeah.
Winnipeg or maybe some other places that are super cold probably has that too. So we talked about car rentals and driving, and in the last episode, your comment about cost of parking, and so there's another one here from Simple Flying: the 10 most expensive airports to park at in 2023, and so there's a list of the 10 most expensive. Or actually, we'll start with the cheapest. The cheapest airline in the world for large airports is Sao Paulo's Guarulhos, so GRU, US $26.74 for 1 week. And then Istanbul's other airport, Sabiha Gökçen, the SAW, $29.43. And the third one is Antalya in Turkey, $32 and a penny. Cheapest in the US, your love for LAX, $34.99 for 1 week for the cheapest parking.
That's really
Yeah,
cheap.
but that must be probably halfway to Anaheim or something.
Yeah. True. Yeah. It'll cost you that much just to get
Yeah,
back
you
to
have
the
to pay that
airport.
much in the taxi fare to get the from the parking.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most expensive airports in the world to park. So Hamad, Doha, $538 to park for a week.
Woo.
Heathrow, $324.
Yep.
San Francisco, 245. Boston Logan, not one I was expecting, 232. Gatwick, London Gatwick for 228. Singapore Changi for 181. Miami for 175. Seattle SeaTac for 169. Amsterdam for 149, and Frankfurt for 147. And this apparently is just sort of like roll up and drive up by the looks of it, because they're saying here, best way to save money on airport car parking is to pre-book. And so, for example, at Heathrow, 1 week's car parking is less than half the price listed above when booked in advance.
And the irony of it all is the spot where the vehicle is going to go is the exact same.
Yeah, exactly. But then on the other side, it's like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you look at some of these, especially European ones, or say Changi with the transit that goes out there. Some of these have very, very good public transport to get to them. So obviously, I think they're pricing it this high to try to discourage people from parking their cars.
Yeah, and price scaling. For those that want to plan in advance, you get the benefit.
Exactly. And then we got one more article,
right.
With interesting locations and flights that you don't necessarily think of. So this is also from Simple Flying. It's unusual. LOT Polish Airlines adds Wrocław to South Korea Boeing 787 flights. Now, reading this article, I learned lots about Koreans in Poland that I didn't know before. And LOT Polish has added a nonstop flights from Wrocław to Seoul Incheon. It's Poland's sixth most populous metro area, 1.1 million people. And the article says it'll be the city's only, and from what they can tell, first long-haul route. So it's 11 hours from Wrocław to Seoul, 11 hours and 20 minutes, and back is 13 hours and 35. Of course, depending on flying over certain countries, restrictions and that kind of thing. And apparently, the booking data shows that approximately 33,000 people flew between Wrocław and Seoul in 2019, 22,000 in 2022, of course, because of coronavirus. But the South Korean capital was by far Wrocław's largest unserved long-haul market, 3 times larger than the second in Toronto. And lots of people fly via Warsaw, but the most popular source of transfer flights was from Warsaw, but then also a good chunk of people flew via Lufthansa from Frankfurt and also Munich. And why is there all of these Korean flights? Well, there is LG Energy Solutions. There's a number of South Korean companies there. They're the largest manufacturer of electric car batteries. 5,000 South Koreans lived in Wrocław, and the city even has a branch of the Bank of Korea. So if you're going for kimchi in Poland, well, I guess you need to where you're going to go. And LOT is planning flights to 8 Asian airports, including Middle East. So there will be Beijing capital, Beijing Daxing, Delhi, Mumbai, Nur Sultan, Narita, Incheon, and Tashkent. And Seoul will have 3 routes, Warsaw to Seoul, Budapest to Seoul, and with LOT, and then also with Korean, and Wrocław to Seoul.
My mind is blown because my memory of going to Wrocław does not match everything you just said last minute. Wow. That, who would have thought that there's this sort of mini Korean population? But when you mentioned those companies and those industries, it all makes sense to have that link and that desire. That's great. I mean, it just shows the world's stretch now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you never know where these, diasporas or communities are in other countries. I think of, say, like one of the biggest searched routes in Canada. Yeah. So there's a very large Filipino community in Winnipeg. And this was, I think it was 2019 that somebody said one of the largest selected routes was, Winnipeg to Cebu for winter flights. Obviously, it's like, getting out of the
incredible
freezing cold. It was something like 30,000 searches or something that people were thinking of doing this flight. It's like, well, and then somebody said, well, why not necessarily, you could have Manila to Winnipeg as a cargo connection.
Yeah. Yeah, because such a huge population in Winnipeg of all places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing was Jollibee, for example. Where was the first Jollibee in Canada? Winnipeg. And then
Winnipeg.
my brother, he lives in Regina, Saskatchewan, said, well, Regina had a Jollibee before Calgary did.
There you go. That's their claim to fame. I love it.
Exactly. So, yeah. So who knows? I mean, yeah. And we'll see more interesting routes with different airlines to places that may not initially come to thought.
Yeah, that might be let's lodge that for a recording.
Yeah.
I think we can find some very interesting
Connections
information
and
on that
routes.
one.
Yeah. Or plans anyway.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, we'll see how the summer goes. We'll see how episodes go. And I'm going to try my best to get this edited and sent out somewhere probably towards the end of my vacation. So hopefully we'll have this out end of July-ish. And then we'll have opportunity to hopefully meet in Toronto and record an episode here.
Exactly.
Cool. So that wraps up Experience 74, the Seat 1A podcast. If you liked this podcast experience, be sure to rate us and subscribe. Tell your friends and fellow travelers about us. Make sure you visit us at podcast.seat1a.org for complete show notes. That's Sierra Echo Alpha Tango, the number 1 alpha.org. Feedback, addenda, letting us know where we've messed up. You can send all of that to stories, STORIES, at seat1a.org. If you'd like to support the show financially, we have a page at Patreon, patreon.com/seat1a. Links are included in the show notes.
And here's what you look forward to in upcoming experiences. And you've already just touched on it for our 75th episode. We're hopefully going to be in the same city and
in the flesh
talk about something. I'm sure we'll have some
plane
very cool
spotting
stories
on Dixon Road.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be shouting through our mics. That might be just an easy way to do it. We're hopefully lining up some interviews and get some great tales from the various people.
Or we'll go sit in the parking lot at the car rental location where I picked up your jacket.
Yeah, that might be. Exactly. And then complain about it. As always, we look forward to your stories and questions. If you have anything you'd like us to talk about, please do let us know. Or if you just have some great tips to share, we're more than welcome to hear them and get them out there to everybody.
Excellent. So until the next time, I'm Geoff. Thanks for listening.
And I'm Vinod. You're cleared for takeoff. Have a great flight.